Greetings everybody, Richard Fulmer here, and welcome to another Richard's Rock Rambles, the lesser known live albums. So the band we're going to check out today is Grand Funk Railroad, or as they later became known, simply Grand Funk. And in their career, they had two notable live albums, one right from the beginning of their career and one sort of midway through. The first one was from 1970, and that was simply called Grand Funk Live, or Grand Funk Railroad Live as they were known then. Probably one of the rawest and in-your-face live albums you will ever hear. I love it. It's almost like you're there. What you're hearing is how it was on the night. There was no mixing done, there was no overdubs done. Guitar, bass, bit of keyboards, drums, two vocalists, the drummer and the guitarist, and there you had it. Brilliant stuff. And that's the album I'm talking about, Grand Funk Live. So that was the first one. And in the band you had Mark Farner on guitar and keyboards and vocals, brilliant frontman, great vocalist, Don Brewer on drums and vocals, and Mel Schacher on bass. So it was a power trio. That was how they were for their first 4 or 5 albums, and they eventually got Craig Frost in on keyboards. Then they had another live album which came out in 1975, I think this was. Yeah, this is the remastered version. That's also a remastered version. No bonus tracks on here or on this live album, but the other remastered studio album of theirs, they did have bonus tracks. This is very different to that early one, a lot more polished. You can see they did a bit of work in the studio, made it sound really nice. Same lineup, like I said, with Craig Frost added on keyboards. He was, by this stage, a fully fledged member of the band. And they also had 3 backup singers. I forget their name now, but the Funkettes. There we go, Grand Funk Funkettes. So they added a bit of spice as well to certain songs. And so that was that one called Caught in the Act, and that was from 1975. I think Styx also had a live album called Caught in the Act. I might be wrong with that. So those were the 2 official live albums. Then in 2002, excuse me, maybe I need some of this. There we go, that's better. In 2002, EMI released a live recording from 1971. So that first live album from 1970 was about their first 2 or 3 live studio albums. And in 2002, this little baby came out. Grand Funk Railroad Live, the 1971 tour. So this would have been on the back of, I think, the album called Survival. Because if you look at some of the tracks on here, I think there's 1 or 2 from that particular album, maybe just 1. So they were just on the back of touring of that album, plus the other hits. And some great live shots of the band there. That's Mel Schacher on bass, there's Mark Farner on guitar, there's Mel again, and there's Don Brewer down below with a very small kit, but trust me, this guy could smack that kit to smithereens. And that was the back. There's a train there, and that says Grand Funk Railroad guest stars Humble Pie. And that was one of the posters, I would imagine. Yeah, Peter Frampton was a big buddy of the band. In fact, that 1997 live album, Live in Bosnia, that came much later, obviously. That was the other live one I forgot to mention. He comes on as a guest, Peter Frampton. So they're the 3 guys. Mel Schacher with the sunglasses on, Don Brewer, the drummer, and there's Mark Farner, a very young Mark Farner. These guys were all in their 20s, I would imagine. There's some more live shots of the guys. Oh, it's just my dog having a shake. And this tells you all about the album and the tracks and how it came about and where it's been all these years. In the vaults. Let's see if there's anything else I can show you. That's just the tracks. And that's Shea Stadium, where some of this concert is taken from. And that Shea Stadium is famous for hosting the Beatles. And believe it or not, Grand Funk sold out Shea Stadium quicker than the Beatles. That takes some doing. So what are the tracks on here? There are quite a few that appear on that earlier live album. This one. So let's see. Are You Ready? That was the track that always kicked off most of the early concerts. There's an intro at the beginning introducing the band like they often did, and then Are You Ready? So that's a great track to kick off a concert. Excellent drumming from Don Brewer and Mark Farner on guitar, the usual high quality. This band was never a favorite of the critics, but hey, critics don't sell your records. It's the fans that buy the stuff, so what did they care? Then there was Foot Stomping Music. And I think, yes, Foot Stomping Music doesn't appear on here, and that was from E Pluribus Funk, which I think was released after this album as well. Then Paranoid, that one with a really hectic wah-wah guitar from Mark Farner. Brilliant sound. Not the Black Sabbath Paranoid, this is the Grand Funk Paranoid. And then their epic track, I suppose their July Morning kind of thing, or Stairway to Heaven, I'm Your Captain, Closer to Home, which was a firm fan favorite, and I believe was also very popular with the guys out in Vietnam, obviously Closer to Home, and that resonated with them. Excuse me, Hooked on Love. I think that's also from E Pluribus Funk, and that doesn't appear on here. Get It Together, that doesn't appear on here. So there are about 3 or 4 tracks that aren't on here that are on this Live 71. TNUC, spelled the other way around. That was the drum solo from Don Brewer. He had a very small kit, but geez, this guy could smack the skins, eh? And this was a band that really got me into rock music. In fact, the first album I ever bought was Phoenix from Grand Funk. And Don Brewer was always one of my favorite drummers to this day. They're still touring today. They haven't made a record for many years, but they still touring Grand Funk, obviously without Mark Farner. And then, of course, another one of the epic tracks, Inside Looking Out, which is quite a long track. Usually went on for like 12 minutes. And that was the Animals track, Eric Burden and the Animals. It was a cover, Inside Looking Out. Lengthy track with different parts to it. Sort of slows down in the middle, and it gets quite a cool groove to that track. And then the other track on here that doesn't appear on this live album, the first one, is Gimme Shelter, the Rolling Stones tune from Let It Bleed. And for me personally, I prefer the Grand Funk version to the Stones. The Stones are great, but these guys just gave it a bit more oomph. Mark Farner in particular on guitar. Some great vocals. Him and Don Brewer were very different kind of singers. Don Brewer had more of a harshness to his vocals. And Mark Farner could hit the high notes and the low notes. Really underrated singer, I always felt. And then they finished off the concert like they did back in the day with Into the Sun, which is also quite a lengthy piece. So there's some great stuff on here, and I must say the recording of this is really well done. It's very similar in vein to that first live album of theirs from the same period. So Mark Farner, guitar, organ, harmonica, percussion, and vocals. So I think he played a bit like of bongos. Don Brewer, drums and vocals, Mel Schacher, bass and percussion. So on that first live album, if you look at the inside sleeve, it says here, and that iconic shot, it says here, live at the Atlanta International Pop Festival. Well, there's none of the tracks on here actually from that concert, so it's very strange. In fact, here it's for the Coliseum in Jacksonville, the Civic Auditorium, Jacksonville Coliseum. So it's not actually at the Atlanta Pop Festival, so that was rather confusing. But this live 1971, they tell you where these tracks are from. Are You Ready was from Chicago, The Syndrome, Cobo Hall, Detroit, Cobo Hall, Paranoid, I'm Your Captain was from Shea Stadium. So there's a few on here from Shea Stadium. Hooked on Love was from Shea Stadium, Get It Together, Gimme Shelter, and the others are from Cobo Hall. So it's about 2 or 3 different venues that they've taken tracks from this tour. Really impressive. I was really glad when they released this. And I'm pretty sure there must be other stuff in the vaults, because Grand Funk went from 68, 69 up to 75. And in that 70s period, there's surely more than just 3 live albums. I suppose, what they need to do is find the correct tapes and clean it up properly, because I suppose some of it wasn't meant to be released, and, they need to tweak it a bit. But that's cool. As long as they release something, I'll be happy, because I'm a big Grand Funk fan, and I'm sure there are many out there, many of you guys who would love to see another live album. But if you can get hold of this one, live in 1971, it's worth a listen. It's raw, it's in your face, it's how they were back in the day. Power Trio Deluxe, one of the best power trios ever to come out of the States, in my humble opinion. Mark Farner was not a Joe Satriani on the guitar, but what he did really well, and it worked within the framework of Grand Funk Railroad and what the kind of music that they played. Don Brewer was an animal behind the kit, and Mel Shacher's bass, that guy's bass is just raw, and he had a growl to his bass, especially even on the studio albums back in the day. Really cool stuff. So there we go, Grand Funk Railroad, or Grand Funk, whichever you prefer, live 1971. One of the lesser known live albums, simply because it was only released many years later. Have yourselves a great week, guys. Take it easy out there, and I'll catch you soon for another live album. Cheers.